We are live.
All right, welcome everyone to our special planning meeting today. Madam Clerk, confirm that roll call has been taken.
Roll has been taken.
Beautiful. Members of the committee, any declaration of pecuniary or any interest on any items appearing on the agenda today? Seeing none. Normally I would call for separations, but we don't have any items on the agenda for consent or consideration. So we'll move forward right into our statutory public hearing. There is one public meeting on today's agenda. The public meeting is held in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act. The purpose of this hearing is to discuss the planning application and to hear from the public either in support or against the application. At the end of the public meeting, the committee will pass a recommendation, which is generally considered for a final decision at the next meeting of council. The name of anyone who speaks in regard to any item will appear within the meeting minutes. Anyone wishing notice of any further proceedings regarding the application should also provide their name and address to the clerk's office. We ask that members of the public in attendance today to speak to an item, please ensure that you add your contact information to the sign-in sheet at the back of the room. The applicant will speak first, followed by municipal staff, and then the public. Each will have up to 10 minutes to speak, inclusive of questions. The applicant will have 5 minutes to provide clarification to any questions or issues raised during the meeting. As a reminder, the following rules of decorum as set forth in the city's procedural bylaw do apply. No person shall display any sign, banner, or place card in the room other than materials that, in the opinion of the chair, are legitimate audio-visual aids necessary in connection with any presentation to be made to the committee. All persons present shall use polite and respectful language and shall refrain from the use of any language or the making of any gesture that is disrespectful or offensive. All persons addressing the committee shall speak only on this subject in debate and shall not speak to any other subject. No person shall applaud participants in debate or engage in conversation or behavior that may disrupt the proceedings of the meeting. So we will now consider item 4.1, which is the Mount Pleasant Road. And I will call up the applicant or the agent of the applicant, I shall say, to speak to the committee regarding your application. Please come forward to the delegates table, state your name and your mailing address. As a reminder, you will have 10 minutes to speak, inclusive of questions. You've stated that you might need a little bit more time, so this is quite detailed. We're looking at 3 phases. If at the 10-minute mark we're not complete, the committee can make a decision to add to that time period, okay? Okay. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair, sorry. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of committee staff, members of the public with us today. My name is Mark Condello. I'm a planner with Glenn Schnarr and Associates. For the record, our address is 10 Kingsbridge Garden Circle, Unit 7, Mississauga, Ontario. I'm here on behalf of Cache Homes, the owner and applicant of the 3 rezoning and draft plan of subdivision applications, which apply to 205 to 211 Mount Pleasant Street, 299 Mount Pleasant Road, and 367-709 to 2409 Mount Pleasant Road being the subject matter of today's meeting. Today, I am accompanied by members of our project team, which include Marcus Gaglieri, Senior Project Manager of Cache Homes, Erica Bailey, Traffic Engineer of Paradigm Transportation Solutions, Alex Dow, Civil Engineer of DSEL, and we're also accompanied online by Nadine Price, ecologist with Beacon Environmental. And Madam Chair, the applications for the committee today are contiguous to each other and form part of the larger Tula Heights community. For the purposes of our discussion with staff, each application represents a development phase, being phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. And for efficiency, I've structured my presentation to speak to all 3 phases. However, if there are questions on a specific phase, myself or members of our team will be able to assist accordingly. On the slide is an aerial context of the subject lands. I think we're all generally familiar with the context, but for the record, the lands are generally located at the northwest side of Mount Pleasant Road, east of Conklin Road, adjacent to the L-E-N-N Trail and the Pioneer Grove subdivision to the north. Lands fronting on the Mount Pleasant consist of residential estate lots. And the lands have a combined area of approximately 51.8 hectares or 1.28 acres. And on the slide, I've noted the extent of all three phases in red. I think it's important to take a quick step back to go over how we got here today. And the slide provides an overview of key timelines in the planning process. And I'll start within the Tula Heights West area, which includes the three phases before today, was annexed from the county of Brant and added to the city of Brantford in 2017. Following this, and through the city's comprehensive municipal review process of its official plan, these lands were identified for future residential purposes. City Council adopted the new official plan in March of 2021, which identified these lands for residential purposes and provided the appropriate residential and neighborhood corridor designations to facilitate residential development. And in August of that same year, the province adopted the city's official plan, which continued to identify these lands for residential purposes. The policies of the August approval are in effect today. A key policy directive in the new official plan was the introduction of a block planning process for new community lands. And the block plan process was intended to provide an overall vision for this community while implementing the in effect policies of the official plan. And in July of 2021, a block planning application was submitted to the city. Open house meetings on that block planning process were held in December of 2021 and again in April of 2022. And city staff approved the block plan in November of 2023. Following that approval of the block plan, this gave Cache the ability to submit site-specific planning applications to the city. Cache Homes and our team have pre-consulted with city staff on all three phases of the application. And on January 8th of this year, Cache hosted a hybrid neighborhood information meeting for all three phases. Following that meeting, a submission for the phase one lands was made in late January of 2024, and subsequent submissions for the phase two and phase three lands followed in March of this year. Following the submissions of the phase one, two, and three applications, Cache Homes has been working with city staff and adjacent resident groups through the circulation review of those materials. And resubmissions of the plans, including key revisions that have been influenced by feedback from staff and the public, have been made and are the basis for the applications being considered today. I won't spend too much time here, but the slides on the screen show excerpts from the city's official plan land use schedule. And I'll note that the majority of the lands are currently designated as residential, with the lands fronting onto Mount Pleasant being designated as neighborhood corridor or suburban residential. And the residential designations that apply to the lands do permit low-rise built forms as well as community uses, such as parks, institutional uses, and small-scale retail. And similarly to the neighborhood corridor designation, this allows for a mix and range of built forms with the exception of singles, semis, and duplexes. And through our review of the application with city staff, it is our opinion the proposed development aligns with the permitted uses in the residential within the corresponding designations. And therefore, an official plan amendment is confirmed to not be required to facilitate this development. As I mentioned earlier, a block planning process for this area was completed and approved by city staff. And through that process, the city and the landowner group, which included Cache Homes, prepared a comprehensive plan for these lands. And through that block planning exercise, the natural heritage system was evaluated. The community needs with regards to servicing and infrastructure were determined. An appropriate built form and transition with the surrounding neighborhoods was studied, and the extent of the applicable land uses was considered. The road and pedestrian network to allow for community connectivity and efficient movement through the community was evaluated, and the extent and location of future parks and school blocks was determined. And I'll note that the rezoning and draft plan application before committee today are required to facilitate the vision in the planned community that was completed through that block planning exercise. And you'll note through my next few slides that the extent of proposed development generally aligns with that approved block plan. On the screen, I provide a composite drawing of all three phases together. And together, the proposed development will facilitate approximately 340 single detached dwellings, 70 semi-detached or linked dwellings, 360 street townhouse dwellings, a future condominium block, as well as community infrastructure in the form of stormwater management blocks, a school block, park blocks, pedestrian walkways, and a local and collector road network. And I'll note for the record that the proposed development will achieve approximately a total of approximately 890 to 920 units between the three phases. And I'll just quickly speak to the phase one lands. And the slide on the screen shows a comparison from the materials that were originally presented to the community in January of this year and to the, and the application as before committee today. And there are some key revisions that I'd like to note. From January to where we are today, we have removed the Sherman Drive vehicle connection and have replaced it with a pedestrian walkway. We further refined the distribution of the built form throughout the plan. Previously, all three phases considered 30-foot lots. These have now been removed and Cache has introduced a semi-detached, what we internally have been referring to as a linked dwelling, where the only common wall between the units is shared between the garage. And in response to concerns that we heard about transition, through the draft plan of subdivision and corresponding zoning bylaw amendment, where the proposal abuts existing neighborhoods, the development of those lands will be restricted to 11-meter lots or 36-foot lots and have a lot depth that's been planned for 30.5 meters or 100 feet. And I will recognize that there's been a lot of discussion and neighbor concerns regarding the proposed Clement Drive access. And the staff report does a great job at describing these concerns as well as the applicant and the city's response to this matter. And I'll just summarize a few points of that. When the subdivision to the north was developed, it was understood that the roadways at Clement and Sherman would have been extended at a future date to accommodate future development. Our team views these connections as a means to increase connectivity between the two neighborhoods, and the connection has planning, engineering, and emergency service merits. The proposed connection will offer the existing neighborhood, an alternative controlled access to Mount Pleasant through the proposed no road network, whereas at Street A, adjacent to Maggie Street, there is a planned controlled signalized access. And to address concerns on road safety through the city staff, through the conditions of approval for the plan of subdivision, will require Cache Homes to plan for traffic calming measures. And the extent of those measures will be determined through the next stage of the process, which includes a detailed design and clearing conditions of the plan of subdivision. Phase one, as I noted, generally aligns with the block planning process. The phase one lands will accommodate approximately 266 to 317 units, which includes approximately 80 single detached dwellings with frontages of 33 feet or 36 feet, 15 linked dwellings, and 75 street townhouse dwellings, as well as a condominium block shown in orange, which has been planned to accommodate between 115 and 145 condominium townhouse units. And the extent of that condominium block will be subject to a future site planning process. I'll just speak to phase two now. And this slide shows a comparison between what was presented to the community in January and what is before committee today. And again, I'll note that the plans generally align with the block planning process. And there's been a few key revisions that I'd like to note for the record. Through our review of the applications, we've made further refinements to the extent of the built forms. We have introduced additional pedestrian connectivity to the through walkway blocks to access the existing trail to the north, as well as some internal walkway blocks between the local roads. We did hear concerns from residents regarding the configuration and alignment of the collector road that intersects at Mount Pleasant. And while it's hard to see the difference between the two plans, the plan before committee today does facilitate an additional shift of that access on Mount Pleasant. And that shift was provided to accommodate some additional separation between the proposed access and the existing driveways on Mount Pleasant. And that access will be further reviewed through the detailed design process, which follows today's meeting. We did hear concerns
I'm just going to interrupt you quickly.
course.
We've exceeded 10 minutes. I see a motion. If there's no objection to the committee, we'll add an additional 10 minutes. Do we have to call for a vote for that? Moved and seconded. We'll call the vote to add additional 10 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Sorry.
No issue.
Councillor Carpenter had seconded.
The motion to add an additional 10 minutes for the applicant carries on a recorded vote of 4-0. Those voting in favor, Councillor Sokoli, Sless, McCreary, Carpenter.
Thank you for your patience. You can continue.
Thank you. I'll just note that we did hear comments that the proposed development did not provide any commercial or retail opportunities at that public consultation with the community and city staff. In response to those comments, through the corresponding zoning bylaw amendment, Block 200, which is shown in orange on the screen and at the corner of Street B at Collector Road in Mount Pleasant, has been proposed to be zoned a mixed-use commercial block, which will facilitate or allow for opportunities for at-grade retail, and the configuration of that block will be determined at a future site planning process. Phase 2 will facilitate the development of approximately 180 single-attached dwellings, 40 linked dwellings, and 195 street townhouse dwellings. This phase will accommodate the two parks that have been located central to the community, the future school block, as well as stormwater management infrastructure. It delineates the natural heritage system. It identifies a compensation area, and it can extends the local and collector road network from phase 1. And I'll speak to phase 3 now. And again, this slide shows a comparison or between what was presented to the community in January and what is before committee today. And a few key differences between the two are that we've made further refinements to the unit distribution. We've introduced a walkway block between to increase the connectivity between phase 2 and phase 3 lands. And similar to phase 1, we did hear concerns regarding transition and built form between the existing dwellings on Mount Pleasant and the proposed development. And through the draft plan and the corresponding zoning bylaw, where the proposal abuts that existing built form along Mount Pleasant, the development of those lands will be restricted to 36-foot lots with a lot depth of 100 feet. We also heard concerns from residents regarding the distribution of park space and the lack of connectivity between the proposed development and Mount Pleasant. And in response, I'll note that the parklands have been strategically located to be central to the community and adjacent to the school block. And with regards to connectivity, in the conditions of approval for phase 3, Cache Homes will be required to explore and implement a walkway block connection from the phase 3 lands to Mount Pleasant. The location and extent of that walkway will be determined through a future detailed design exercise. Phase 3 will accommodate the development of approximately 80 single detached dwellings, 20 linked dwellings, and 90 street townhouse dwellings. And you may note that the lands that abut the estate lots in Mount Pleasant are shown as a block as opposed to individual lots. And the reason for this is because through the detailed design process, there may need to be a servicing block to ensure appropriate drainage is accommodated between the proposed and the existing development. The future lotting of this block will be provided when the final subdivision is prepared, which will follow the detailed design exercise, as well as the analysis to determine where an appropriate location for that walkway block can be provided. I did speak to, through my presentation, speak to zoning and how we're using zoning as a tool to define specific built forms and community uses. And this slide shows the extent of how the proposed zones have been applied to the subject lands. And a few key points I'd just like to bring up. We did identify site-specific residential zones. One zone will, again, to define those limits that abut existing communities and restrict the development of those lands to 36-foot lots. We identified an additional residential zone internal to the lands, which facilitates single detached dwellings and linked dwellings. Where you see townhouses on the draft plan of subdivision, those lands have been restricted to a townhouse specific zone. I did make mention that we are introducing a mixed-use commercial zone at the corner of Street B and Mount Pleasant to allow for that future commercial and retail opportunities. And I'll note that the school block has been dual zoned to allow for residential permissions should the school board determine that that block is no longer required or not required. And I'll note that the proposed development does include holding provisions that speak to Cache having to confirm that servicing financial requirements has been addressed to the satisfaction of the city, that a subdivision agreement has been entered into, and that the school board be granted a period of 7 years to determine if the school block is required. All of which I understand are standard conditions for greenfield development in the city, and which our team has no concerns with proceeding on. My next few slides, I'm almost done, Madam Chair, just are some renderings of the proposed built form that is being provided. And just a few quick notes that the 36-foot lots have been designed to accommodate both a 2-car garage and a 2-car driveway. The 33-foot lots have been designed to accommodate a 2-car driveway, and those parameters are captured in the proposed zoning. And through the 36-foot foot lots and the 33-foot lots, those built forms have been planned to provide ample parking for each dwelling unit, which in turn will help alleviate any on-street parking demands this community may have. On this is a rendering of the proposed townhouse blocks. And here's an example of a linked product and how that may look once it's completed. And Madam Chair, those are my submissions. I'll just close out that I've reviewed the staff report and I agree with the staff's recommendations today. And I'd be happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Terrific. We have about 5 minutes left and I have Councillor McCreary with the question.
Chair, thank you very much. Welcome, folks. The primary contention with neighboring residents appears to be the conversion of Clement into a through street. Excuse me. And I think there's 2 or 3 reasons given with respect to the planning application for doing that. It would seem to be that the deal breaker is in terms of providing emergency access. Is that what you would agree with that?
I would agree that typically emergency services would require 2 access points to a community. Right now through phase 1, we only have the Street A at Maggie intersection where that Clement Drive would allow secondary access.
Have you considered the opportunity to build the loop street? I guess I can't remember what it's called in your proposals. Is it the arterial street?
It would, on the draft plan of subdivision, it goes from Street A to Street B. That's the collector road network.
Sorry, collector. So is there an opportunity for you to build the collector route out in its entirety in phase 1 and perhaps not have to deal with opening Clement?
It's something that certainly could be explored with staff through the draft plan conditions. Right now, just because there is a lot of infrastructure that would have to be built to accommodate that ring road, that looping road. Our construction program, our Cachet's construction program is limited to the phase 1 lands right now, but it's a fair point.
So barring that, is there an opportunity for that to be constructed so that when the arterial road is complete, that road could be bollarded or car trapped like they do on bus roads?
It's a fair comment, and that's something that could be explored, absolutely.
Okay, so that's something that you will undertake then?
Through the conditions of approval with staff, we can undertake that through detailed design. And sorry, Madam Chair, I should be directing these through you.
I'm not that picky. Are you?
No, I'm never that picky when I'm in that chair either.
I was asking if you were done.
Oh, I thought you were asking if I was that picky. No, I have one more. Stormwater management ponds or swamps, as some refer to them. Is that legislated by the province of Ontario that those be provided in all new developments?
Through you, Chair, I may defer to staff just to make sure I don't misspeak, but I'm going to say yes.
Okay, that was my only other question. Thank you.
So we don't yell out in the room, but I do see that the applicant will have an opportunity to come back after the staff application. And at that point, because I do think there's another staff member back there that definitely knows the answer. So I would encourage you to consult and then address that question during the
Thank you,
application.
Madam Chair. Yep.
We have about a minute and a half left. I have Councillor Carpenter with a question.
Yeah, so I assume Street J continues into the future development, so we're not having any dead end streets in this subdivision?
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, the acoustics in the room, I didn't quite
Oh,
catch that.
Street J, am I to understand that goes straight through? Looks like it does on the plan.
I'm sorry,
Street J,
on which phase?
phase
So-
2, I think. It goes into
Phase
phase
two?
3. Does that continue? It looks like it does in the plan. Well, let me put it this way. You don't have any streets that are just ending in T intersections. They're all full streets or cul-de-sacs.
Through you, Madam Chair, that's correct.
Okay, and there was some discussion about moving a park. Are those parks are all pre-designed as part of where the subdivision goes, and of changing the parks will. Am I also to understand that you have more park space there than is required?
Through you, Madam Chair, that's to your point about the over dedication. Between its 3 phases, technically these lands are over dedicated. And as I made mention in my presentation, there was a block planning exercise that was completed with city staff. And through that block planning exercise, we determined an appropriate central location for those park blocks.
And so that over dedication of parkland, I think it's is by about 30%,
I don't have the number in front of me, Madam Chair, but
but you're not charging the municipality, Cassia is not charging the municipality for that over dedication anyway. We're not paying for it.
through you, Madam Chair, what typically happens through block planning exercises, there's a landowner group and a cost sharing agreement that is implemented amongst the landowners. So while Cache is taking the burden of, not, I shouldn't say burden, but we'll be implementing most of the parkland, if not all the parkland, through that block planning process. Other landowners would have to contribute to proportionally share that for those costs. So
Yeah, but not the municipal taxpayer. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We've exceeded our 10 minutes. I think we're likely ready to move forward with the staff presentation at this point. But there were a few questions. I'd encourage you to use your 5 minutes after the public portion to address some of those questions at that
thank you,
time.
Madam Mayor. Chair.
Thank you. So I will now call upon city staff to present their version of the application. As a reminder to city staff, you'll have 10 minutes inclusive of questions from the committee.
Morning, Madam Chair, members of Planning Committee. My name is Jeff Medeiros. I'm a senior project manager at the city, and I'm here for you this morning to present the staff recommendation report. And that is with respect to Planning Act applications, 3 of which are amendments to the County of Brant zoning bylaw, and then 3 seeking draft plan approval on 3 separate plans of subdivision. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail in the next few slides. This is the overarching plan that provides or illustrates all 3 phases. I think most folks here in the neighborhood and at committee today know these lands. It's in Tula Heights West, about 52 hectares, 128 acres. In terms of surrounding uses, it is primarily residential, and there is some open spaces and recreational uses in the neighborhood as well. Just some illustrations. This is from phase 1 from Mount Pleasant Road, continuation onto the next slide. Also phase 1 looking, I would say, east. So this would be the western limits of phase 1. That's looking towards Mount Pleasant. Phase 2 and phase 3 land. So I think as everyone can see, it's vacant and historically been used for agricultural purposes. From the official plan, as the applicant indicated, the uses are very much permitted, so that the applications did not trigger the need for an official plan amendment. It's in a designated greenfield area. What that means is there is a prescribed density target that comes from provincial policy, and a small portion is within a core natural area, which is an environmental protection. Went through an extensive block plan process. That very much was a visionary exercise with city staff, a better part over a year. And I won't go into the specifics, but it generally provided some detail in terms of the distribution of roads, how these areas will be serviced, the built forms, and so forth. I'm also not going to go too specifically in the zoning bylaw. The staff report does cover that in detail. What I do want to get across with the zoning bylaw is the distribution of the different built forms, and that's indicative of the use or the different zones. So when you get into an R1, R2, you're looking at singles and semis. More of the medium density products, so that'd be street fronting condo towns, that'd be the RM2, and then some other corresponding zones, C5, an institutional zone for the school, and then corresponding open space zones. And as I said, the staff report provides a bit more details to all the specific requests that are captured in the zoning bylaw. With respect to the draft plan of subdivision, what the applicant is seeking is draft plan approval. What that basically means is it's an approval in principle. So with that, there would be a number of conditions applied to each plan of subdivision. Those are appended to the staff report. And what occurs following draft plan approval is detailed design. That's where the developer gets into the nitty-gritty details about everything, placement of services, the design of the storm ponds, and so forth. And those particular conditions are appended to the staff report. Just one item to note too on them, there is a blanket 3-year lapsing window. So subdivisions typically have to be registered within a 3-year window. However, they can seek an extension through the city. With respect to development considerations, so what that means is considerations that staff would have regard for through the public process, whether it be the zoning and the plan of subdivision. The first point is the holding provision. That's typically tied to the zoning. It's quite standard. We normally see it on plans of subdivision. And what that means is that there would be a requirement for the developer to satisfy any applicable requirements under the subdivision and then enter into an agreement with the city. Another component of the holding is on the school block, and also consistent with other subdivisions in the city. There's a window, a 7-year window following registration. And what that basically means is that the school boards will advise city staff if in fact the school is going to be going to that site. And typically that's tied back to a 7-year window. With respect to archaeology, the EIS, the traffic impact assessment, those are the detailed studies and plans that were submitted to the city through the initial process. Typically, there are draft plan conditions that would need to be satisfied that deal with those specific requirements. Next item is parkland dedication, and the applicant did provide a bit of an overview on that. They're primarily located in phase 2, and as the applicant had indicated, there is an over dedication. That is discussed a little bit further in the staff report, but typically with parkland dedication, it's tied to a plan of subdivision condition. The requirements come out of the Planning Act as well as the city's parkland dedication bylaw. And then lastly is public input, which I'll go into a little bit more detail in the next few slides. So I think as everyone could probably can appreciate, there were some themes in terms of some of the commentary that were presented to city staff. I'm going to break them out a little bit in the next few slides. So the first one is the Clement Drive extension. As the applicant had indicated, the ends of Clement and Sherman were always envisioned to be extended. With how they're designed in terms of how they're stubbed. If you look at the registered plan of subdivision, there's reserves. What that typically means is that at some point, this road may be extended, and that's quite common in plans of subdivision. With respect to the current plan that's presented right now, so that includes the walkway block to Sherman and the connection to Clement. Staff are in support of that. We don't have an objection to the walkway block. It makes perfect sense. But we are in support, our staff are, in support of the extension of the access to Clement Drive. As the applicant had indicated, it was always envisioned that this access was going to be extended. Really what it's intended for is to provide traffic circulation. That could be through pedestrians, that can be through motor vehicles. That's also not necessarily just for this subdivision. The benefits of that also carry forward with the Pioneer Grove subdivision. There's a proposed controlled intersection at McGee and Street A. That's the collector road. One doesn't exist today. So individuals that live in Pioneer Grove would benefit from accessing Mount Pleasant. As the applicant has also indicated, it would assist with emergency services. And as I said too, with respect to the benefits to the Pioneer Grove neighborhood, it also provides them access to this community in the sense of the amenities. There's a school block, there's parks planned, there's a mixed-use commercial block. Removing that access would really impact the ability for residents to access those sort of amenities. With respect to compatibility in existing neighborhood, once again, some general themes: density, neighborhood character, school capacity, access to amenities. As it relates to density, I think one thing to get across is this is a very different policy regime in terms of how this subdivision is proposed. It's 2024. The Pioneer Grove subdivision dates back to the 1980s. Very different policy framework in terms of density targets, market conditions, the cost of housing. So very much aligns with provincial direction. As it relates to neighborhood character, the best tool that municipalities have is the zoning bylaw. And when reviewing it, if you review the staff report, there are specific provisions being proposed. So just one to acknowledge is any of the lands that are adjacent to the Clement Drive, Cooper Court, Hogarth Street area, so the Pioneer Grove subdivision, as well as Mount Pleasant estate lots. Those lots will have specific zones. And what that means is they're only going to permit singles. There's going to be an increase in rear yard setback, and the lot sizes are larger. So that's a tool that's being controlled through the zoning bylaw. And with respect to school boards, they were very much involved in the block planning process. They were also circulated the Planning Act applications. The school site was earmarked here in consultation with the school board. And as I said, there is a draft plan conditions to deal with the design and development of the school board in the future. And funny enough, we also received a comment about the lack of amenities. That does seem to be sometimes a constant message that does happen in West Brant that we hear through the public meme process. And I'm happy to hear that there is a mixed-use commercial block that was negotiated between city staff and the developer, and that's now included in phase 2. Lastly, Mount Pleasant Road. So some general themes, some of them were just questions. So traffic, yes, there will be some traffic generated from this development. I think that is a known. There's an increase in density. However, we don't quite know what sort of improvements are going to be fully required yet. As I mentioned, a signalization along Mount Pleasant, future roundabout, potentially turning lanes and so forth. So there will be some improvements that will be required on Mount Pleasant to deal with traffic. And typically those are at the cost of the developer. And then lastly is the estate lots of Mount Pleasant Road. There were a few commentaries specifically regarding some of those estate lots, particularly them being landlocked. And then the other component being a request for a potential parkette or an open space buffer between some of the adjacent properties. As it relates to landlocking, I would say that these lots are not landlocked. They still have frontage on a public street. They can still be serviced. In the event that those may be developed in the future, there may be applications that would be presented or come forward to this committee in the future. But then with respect to the estate law, and as the applicant had indicated during the presentation, there already is an over dedication of park spaces, parkland for this development. They are strategically located and have been planned for through the block plan process. And in terms of the location, they're central to the neighborhood. And that's not just the existing neighborhood, that's the future neighborhood. And typically you see park spaces co-locate with schools. And that's why the plan as presented today is shown that way. So in conclusion, planning staff are recommending approval of the subject zoning bylaw amendments and draft plans of subdivision. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that committee may have. Thank you.
I would love to give you questions, but we've just exceeded the 10 minutes, looking for a motion to extend that an additional 10 minutes. Okay, so seeing nobody wanting to extend the staff presentation timeline, we will not be taking questions at this point. All right. We will now open the floor to members of the public seeking to speak to the item. If you are tuning in virtually, I just ask that you use the raise hand function button at the bottom of your screen to indicate that you would like to speak. I see that some individuals have already begun that. But we do have some registered delegates, so I'm going to go to the delegations that have registered to speak first. And then we're going to open it up to any individual who is here, either in person or virtually, to address the committee and share their concerns. So first, I will call up one of the registered delegations, Chris Farrell. Sorry to make you go first. So what I'll have you do is just come up to one of the tables here. Push the start stop button on the microphone. When it lights up red, you'll be ready to speak. Once you're ready to begin, just state your name and your mailing address. As a reminder, you'll have 10 minutes to speak, inclusive of questions from the committee.
Good morning, members of the Planning Committee, councilors, staff, and guests. My name is Chris Farrell, residing at 373 Mount Pleasant Road. Today, I represent the concerns of my neighbors in Tootla Heights, specifically those along Mount Pleasant Road between Tootla and Conklin and throughout Valley Estates. They are deeply troubled by the proposed block plan. They fear that it will adversely affect their well-being, property values, and overall quality of life due to the inadequately planned infrastructure such as roads, schools, hospitals, as well as the degradation of air quality, environmental landscapes, and resources. Regrettably, due to time constraints, I can only address one specific issue today. Should you wish to hear more about their concerns, I'd gladly provide that additional information. Today, I advocate for a crucial change in the zoning of Phase 3. Specifically, I propose that the current residential zoning intended for a cul-de-sac of 8 houses in Block 74 be reconsidered and rezoned as either open space parkette or woodlot. The current design is flawed as Phase 3 is completely void of 1 square foot of green space. The proposed cul-de-sac covers approximately 1.0 acres or 0.405 hectares, and currently is a natural woodlot adorned with over 100 mature trees and features several flat grassy areas. It would be a disservice and disregard to destroy this natural habitat when the 8 to 10 houses could be accommodated in one of the residential reserve areas on the plan. I have actively participated in the block plan process since 2021. This day marks a significant milestone for our city, being the first of its kind to come before City Council. It introduces a new process involving citizens, staffs, and developers. And this learning curve has led many neighbors to feel complacent due to frustration and lack of understanding, particularly among our elderly who are unfamiliar with virtual meetings. Our small business owners, and there's many of them in the area, fear their businesses would be jeopardized should they come forward. This plan, considering our neighborhood from an altitude of 50,000 feet up. The problem is that design and zoning set before you today do not take into consideration the ground level experiences or concerns of existing residents in our neighborhood. It has been communicated several times the benefits and features of the plans for new residents, but again, fails to consider those that have resided in the neighborhoods for decades. New residences in phase 1 and 2 benefit from access to green space, which was described in a public meeting in January as beautifully landscaped swim pond areas, the heritage areas of Franklin Grove Memorial Forest, Farrington Cemetery, and 8.5 acres of parks. 25% of the new residences, over 200 dwellings on the block plan, will benefit by backing onto these spaces. However, 0% of the existing properties on the perimeters of the development will have access to green space. Also, 0% of the parkland is allocated to residences in the space. This is completely out of balance with the city's vision statement that Brantford is a place that respects its past and embraces its future. As I mentioned, there's an opportunity in phase 3 to preserve a wooded area that may serve our existing and future residences to help balance these scales. Please allow me to describe our neighborhood from the ground level and how the cul-de-sac will further degrade the green space and impact them. Tula Heights and Mount Pleasant Road residences hold significant historic significance, and the neighborhood is known for its natural beauty, attracting tourists and enriched with generational family homes that have contributed significantly to the city's economic wealth and culture. More recently, we have attracted young professionals and their families and middle-aged retirees looking for an escape from other overly developed areas in Ontario and even parts of Brantford. These residents have made and continue to make significant philanthropic contributions to Brantford. Our neighbor has provided tens of thousands of jobs for over 40 years in Brantford, who takes pride in hiring students, single moms, newcomers, and those with disabilities entering the workforce for their first job. This plan will wrap a minimum of 8 dwellings around their property and destroy over 50 trees. Our other neighbor here today have been a resident of the area for 80 years, attending Farrington Public School when it existed as a child, and maintained the Farrington Cemetery grounds for over 30 years. They face the prospect of another 8 dwellings surrounding their property. Again, dozens of trees will be lost in that process. These are admirable examples of our neighbors and are not uncommon as you go door to door. Unfortunately, what is common is an average of 6 dwellings backing onto their properties with no buffer. Should you wish to learn more about that and us, I'd be happy to oblige. Today, I focus on aligning the city's mission statement, official plan, urban design manual, and fiscal impact studies to ensure you have an informed decision. The proposed cul-de-sac design in Block 74 raises several concerns. It encloses neighboring properties with houses towering a minimum of 33 feet, 20 feet from our existing properties. From me to that picture of Joseph Brandt. this will immediately create walls around our home. Aside from being outdated and an ineffective design option for a plan of this density, this layout is unprecedented in our city, where traditionally cul-de-sacs typically maintain a balanced backyard to backyard ratio or back onto open green spaces, unlike the current proposal. You'll also notice that there are no other cul-de-sacs throughout the other phases of the plan. In contrast, reallocating the space as an open space parkette or woodland preserves our natural heritage, but also provides essential amenities like shades, recreation space, and environmental benefits, aligning with our city's long-term vision for sustainable growth and neighborhood management. It maintains respect for existing neighborhoods, aligning with the city's proposed vision and value statement to create a better place to live. Staff are concerned about the allocation of park space in the overall block plan and the costs associated. The fiscal impact study shows that the project itself will generate a substantial annual net surplus of almost $500,000 from the new dwellings, conservatively based on the 2022 assessments, indicating feasibility and support of open space parkette woodland that could benefit the entire community for generations to come. That net surplus plus the net surplus from the 5-figure property taxes some of us pay, the existing residents in Tootla Heights can mitigate these costs on the long term. I urge the planning committee to consider the zoning of phase 3, reallocating the proposed residential cul-de-sac block 74 to an open space parkette or woodlot. You can confidently make this decision as it not only respects our neighborhood's character and environmental sustainability, but it also supports our city's mission of fostering livable, inclusive communities, and all the while aligning the official plan, legislation, and urban design manual. It follows zoning regulations and can be supported fiscally by net surpluses of the revenues from the project and the existing neighborhood tax surpluses. Cache has presented this specific solution to the city, the school board, and councilors, and is willing to make the modification as long as it doesn't delay the project. Staff from Grand Erie School Board Planning Department explained to me that this proposed version meets their requirements. There are councilors not in attendance today who support this version. Thank you for your time and consideration. I ask you to make this crucial amendment in alignment with your shared values. If I could have the imagery, I'd appreciate that. My question is, will you make this change and support this recommendation?
We have about 30 seconds for questions. Councilor McCreary.
Chair, thank you. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks.
Do you have an understanding of the history of how the lot lines, the back lot lines are different from your property as opposed to the other properties
I
along there?
don't. I'm sorry, I don't.
It's odd, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I just have one question for you, Chris, for clarity. You had stated, and I want to make sure I'm understanding, 0% of existing property owners have access to green space.
Yeah.
What
So
do you mean by that?
I mean the properties along Mount Pleasant Road
Mhm.
and Cooper Court and Hogarth.
What do you mean by access to green space?
Well, when they look out their windows, they're not going to see any trees. They've all been torn down.
Okay,
Sure.
thank you. And we've just exceeded the 10 minutes, so thank you so much for your presentation. I'll have you have a seat.
Thank you.
And we do have up next another registered delegate. We have Dave McAllister. So Dave, just have a seat. Push the button, the start-stop button. When it lights up red, you're ready to go. State your name and your address, and then the floor is yours for 10 minutes.
Okay. My name's Dave McAllister. I live at 17 Clement Drive. And I'm presenting today on behalf of the residents of Pioneer Grove. I'm just watching the slideshow here. If we could go to the next slide.
You'll have to say next slide.
Oh,
yeah, sorry.
Okay. You're all familiar with Pioneer Grove, but I'd just like to call out a few highlights. Pioneer Grove is an established neighborhood with homes as old as 30 years or more. We have no through traffic, quiet dead end streets, and you'll routinely see children outside playing in those streets. And there's also a park for young children, and it's also a park for the two group homes that are in our community. And if you look at our picture, I learned yesterday, that slide, the pink swing that you see there, that's actually a specialized swing for adults from the group home. Just evidence that they do share that with us. And we just feel that this is a community that has a positive environment for families, and we just really feel it should be preserved. Next slide. This is a busy slide. This is my nerdy slide. I'm an accountant, so we have to speak with facts. So yesterday, rather than just say kids are outside, I took these pictures, and I wasn't surprised to see this, but there's 25 basketball and hockey nets throughout our streets. And I showed their addresses, but it's just so great to still see kids outside in our neighborhood. And with the proposed plan, the traffic will be very concentrated up Beckett Drive, right near the back of our subdivision, and then left through Clement. And when I added this up, 18 of the pictures that you see there today, if tomorrow there's busy traffic through those streets, even heightened traffic, what you see in those pictures will most likely cease to exist, which would be a real tragedy. Next slide. So I've had the privilege of talking with many members of our community, and all of us, everyone I talk to feels the same. We understand the need for the new development. We do not understand the need to route its traffic through our neighborhood. The cost to us far outweigh the benefits. Pioneer Grove was envisioned for through streets, but that was long before high density 900+ home developments existed. So we feel that envisioning statement is irrelevant. We appeal to the City Council to amend the development plans to have Clement Drive as emergency only access to Tutela Heights West. We see access to other Brantford neighborhoods being restricted, such as Palmerston and Ada Ave, to protect them from traffic. And we would like the same for Pioneer Grove. And just as evidence that this is a unanimous opinion from Pioneer Grove, there's a number of petitions. Fran Campbell issued one that is just specific to the residents of Clement Drive, which we all signed. Martin Sternzak also circulated a paper petition throughout the subdivision with 150+ signatures. And I recently organized an online petition. We now have 260 signatures. What is officially submitted is only the residents of Brantford, which as of yesterday was 165, just to let that be known. So about 100 of those are our supporters. I checked this morning, there's now 290 petition signers. And there was an article that you may have seen put out last night. I think it's in today's paper from the Expositor. But we all feel what happens here to us on Clement Drive and in Pioneer Grove. That's relevant to everyone in Brantford that's near a high density development that's there today or may be there tomorrow. Next slide. Our specific concerns are safety, noise, and parking. We feel access to Tutela Heights West should flow through a main artery street. Mount Pleasant Road has 2 lane streets. It has stoplight. There's no parks and no mailboxes. In addition, Mount Pleasant could include turning lanes, which I think I heard mentioned earlier today, into the new streets. So like it would go a 3rd lane just into the new streets, into the new subdivision, which is much safer. As far as allowing Mount Pleasant to access through Beckett Drive. We don't think a turning lane would be possible. There's already homes there. But maybe, we don't think so. Next slide. So specifically, we're concerned about the park. So through traffic on Clement Drive represents an unreasonable safety risk to users of Mayor Commons Park, which is located really close to the street. One of the residents actually measured it 7 feet from the street at its closest point. And as you'll see in the top right picture, today there aren't many cars at all that park around the street. Just the residents are courteous and respectful, and they partake in the park. So it's in our own interest, so you won't see many cars at all. That picture was taken yesterday. With the new development, there will be more cars parked on Clement Drive with phase 1 specifically. We did some rough math. There could be as many as 600 cars in phase 1. And they'll likely have limited parking. And with Clement open, I think it'd only be natural for some of them to be parking on our street and just walking to their home. I would do the same if I lived there. And if you look in the bottom right, some of our residents helped yesterday just to give a visual. We parked our cars around the park. And you could just have a visual of today, fewer kids coming to and from the park across the street. It's much safer. With tomorrow, they're navigating through parked cars, which young kids won't see cars coming, and more cars coming won't see the young kids. Also, we feel that, well, there will be more users of the park. Phase 1 could have up to 900 people and they don't have a park. So naturally, some of those residents will come to Mayor Commons, which we think is great. But that's just adding more people and more risk. Next slide. So here's another look at Clement with more cars. We took this yesterday. I knocked on a few doors and people were more than happy to disrupt their day and just come and park the car to give this visual. But you can see how narrow this passage is. Even without the cars, this is a narrow passage. And the proposed plan, if you really look at the end game with all phases, it could result in over 2,000 cars that, yes, they're not all going to flow through here, but they will have the option. So that's a scary thought for us. So we feel that's an unreasonable risk to our safety and an imposition to our neighborhood. Next slide. So I had my nerdy slide. This is my jerky slide. I apologize. But we've seen some reference to the property tax revenue from the new development, but we wanted to highlight the revenue from our development, our survey. This is my very rough math, but it's conservative. There's over 200 well-kept homes in our survey. I know I pay over 5,000, around 5,000, a bit over in taxes, and I'm assuming the rest is somewhere around there. So that's annual tax revenue we pay of over $1 million. And as I said earlier, these homes are up to 30 years old. So if you do, in total, we've contributed over $20 million in taxes. And we don't want to throw that in your face. We just feel that that's important. And what we're asking for is very reasonable. And we feel that our voices should be heard. And last slide. So again, on behalf of the residents of Pioneer Grove, we ask you to please keep Clement Drive a closed street. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dave. We do have 30 seconds. Seeing no questions from the committee, thank you for your time. Up next, we have Martin, and I'm going to try very hard with your last name. Please forgive me. Starensack? Close? Thank you, sorry. Just have a seat. Turn on the mic. When it lights up red, you're ready to go. State your full name and your mailing address, and then the floor is yours for 10 minutes. Do you have a presentation? Okay. So we'll put the presentation up and just make sure that you're verbalizing next slide when you're ready to switch.
Sorry.
Is there?
I believe
Well,
there's
where
a,
was-
I believe there's a clicker right to your rights as well. You can use
Oh,
that.
okay.
Where was the clicker 3 presentation?
It was there.
Okay, okay, okay. There you go. Floor is yours.
What do I gotta hit?
You're on, you're
Oh,
on.
come on.
Just state your name, your address, and away you go.
All right, my name is Martin Stadenchuk. I live at 62 Beckett Drive in the Pioneer Grove neighborhood. So I'll just jump into this. I'm going to talk fast because I had this at 12 minutes. So this presentation is going to include the road connection, the trail, the urban design blend of new and established builds and employment areas. I did survey during the before the January 6th meeting. This most common concern is safety at the park, increased traffic of new residents and delivery vehicles using Pioneer Grove as a thoroughfare. Additionally, Pioneer Grove has 2 group homes along with many young children. The park is children and special needs park, is on Clement with pathways for kids to run on up to the curb, which actually isn't a curb, it's the flat curb. We truly hope that you don't think the installation of a thoroughfare with this type of park so close to the road is a logical idea. Cache Homes has adjusted their plans and created a walkthrough on Sherman. We now ask that the city request Cache Homes to either make both a walkthrough or the city do their part with the installation of an emergency access gate. This layout will provide worry-free enjoyment, provides peace of mind for parents and caregivers, knowing that the park so close to the road will not have unnecessary traffic. Emergency access gates provide a separation to prevent added traffic, provide safety to Pioneer Grove neighborhood and those who utilize the park. It has been a closed-off subdivision for so long that the children in this neighborhood play along the road and throughout the entire neighborhood. I would even go so far as to say that every child in this neighborhood is known one way or another because they're out there getting that exercise they deserve and need in a safe place. By creating a thoroughfare, unknown drivers will not be looking out for them. The children so used to not having to worry about traffic will not be prepared for this, and the parents will now have an added fear. Emergency access gates provide an economical solution to this and still provide emergency services the opportunity to access it if required. When speaking with Marcus from Cache Homes, his rebuttal to the connection was it would reduce traffic to Pioneer Grove members down Beckett. The reality is this is not a solution, but a diversion onto a road where children will be playing. And to add, no one is going to zigzag through only to turn back, and this includes the delivery trucks, thanks to GPS and the shortest and fastest routes option. As a side note, you've kindly heard our request for the installation of traffic lights at the end of Beckett, and we believe this will no longer create that urge to beat the Mount Pleasant traffic, thus eliminating the need for speed and speed bumps. Unknown to you folks, this park is busy with kids learning to ride their bikes, playing hockey, baseball, soccer, capture the flag, tag, whatever the game may be at the time. Parents have peace of mind letting their kids go to this park because they don't have to worry about traffic. This will be gone with this road open. This area has allowed kids to have somewhat of an independence and provides them an opportunity to play, argue, and solve their problems. I know because I laugh at the arguments because I can hear them. It allows these kids to learn the right and wrongs, and it provides them a safe area to play. Parents know this. That's what this park does for this community. We can appreciate why you would want a road connection, but the truth is, and like Dave said, their 30 years subdivision are different. Lot sizes are different. The amount of homes going to be built are different. But these kids have had this area to themselves and they won't be looking to traffic here. We need to maintain this so that no caregiver, parents prevent their child from going to play at the park because they don't trust the traffic. Or God forbid, an incident does happen that prevents them from that freedom. The risk versus benefit to this neighborhood sides with the children. And we as parents, caregivers, and taxpayers sincerely request, and the children, sincerely request that access gates be installed for Clement. So the next topic is the trail. With access points to the trail in this development will coincide with Brantford's Green Space Initiative and conforms with Brantford's active living by providing the community with a means of maintaining a healthy and active lifestyle. This neighborhood would like to request an access point to the trail along Hogarth, Cooper, and McBride so that the community members east and west of Mount Pleasant, including Empire and this future development, can have safe passage to Lions Park. Solution is to have the access point It will provide a natural blend of old and new neighborhoods and will reduce safety concerns for the children and adults biking through Beckett Drive to either go to and from Lions Park. I know Councillor Sikoli, you yourself use the trail. So this is not to scale, but the black line going through would be the trail that would run along all the way to the existing trail and would give that Mount Pleasant side access to it. Phase 3 is they are creating walking paths along current residents' homes to Mount Pleasant. We suggest that if it can be done in phase 3, then ask the people of this area if a trail connection would be something they would want. I can assure you it would be welcomed. Although this is not what Cachet Homes wants, we're not here for Cachet Homes. We're here for Brantford and to better the city and to work with the people that actually live here. That is the responsibility you have chosen to take, and that's the responsibility we expect. We truly see this as an opportunity to pioneer a beautifully integrated neighborhood and more vibrant. After getting together as a neighborhood and brainstorming with members from both east and west side of Mount Pleasant, we would like the city to require an access point via the lands directly behind Hogarth, Cooper, Clement, and McBride. It would complement the beautiful trail network already in place and be inciting for residents east of Mount Pleasant, in Pioneer Grove, in Empire, and the future development as well. Gives safe passage and it makes sense. Understanding that the trail is rented, it's not going anywhere, and we would even welcome Cachet's home of request of, I believe they want to do Clement up at 6 meters, but the city's asking for 8, but we'd be fine with 6 meters as well. Additionally, this will provide an addition of privacy and natural separation between new and old, between the new development and the established Pioneer Grove, along with an appealing selling feature that helps blend the existing neighborhood with its pedestrian thoroughfares. We understand that there is a concern about security. However, the Empire subdivision had no choice but to do it, and everything seems to work out fine. Given the opportunity, those affected would not stray from the idea of having this path and would welcome the natural break from the subdivision. We understand that this would be difficult for Cachet Homes to incorporate with their current plan, but again, zoning and the city have the opportunity to pioneer a beautifully integrated and vibrant neighborhood, and this needs to be the ultimate goal. These are a couple pictures of our area. Older homes with newer homes, rebuilt homes. Top left is the new subdivision placed in, which blends in perfectly, unlike the townhouse at the bottom left. This is not a townhouse subdivision. This is not a townhouse area. The urban design manual recommends homes to a degree blend in with the existing surrounding area. During the January meeting, people were concerned about lot sizes. This area is a prestigious area. We don't move from this area until now. Some people are moving because of this development. Everyone I know in this neighborhood has been here from the beginning or purchased their home because people who owned it previously have decided to downsize, not because they wanted to move somewhere else. Brantford should be looking at this development as an opportunity to bring in professional people who want affordable quality homes and homes that they have the room to enjoy their property, just like the newly built subdivision between McGee and Gilkinson. Those homes are what this development should be. Adequately sized lots that will entice professionals and families to want to live in Brantford, not just to plant as many homes as possible. There are no townhomes on 26-foot lots here. There's no 36-foot lots, homes in this area, and this includes the newly developed subdivision I just mentioned. This area is a prestigious area and sought after. Just look at the listings between this. Just look at the listings. We don't move because we have the lot size that we can enjoy. That is what professional people want. That is what young families want. And that's what this community wants. Ultimately, we believe the councillors in the city have a responsibility to dictate the lot sizes within the requirements. This area is not a location to utilize the absolute minimum requirement regarding lot sizes. To place affordable housing, which may be another name for low-income housing, is not fair to this area. And if it's not low-income housing, then you're ripping people off. We would be curious to know what the reduction for our taxes will be if our property value will be lowered because of a low-income subdivision at our doorsteps. We're not requesting 100-foot lots, but we would like the city to take into consideration a reasonable size lot size, just like similar to the new subdivision between Maggie and Gilkinson, which will entice professionals and families to join this neighborhood. That's what's in this area, and that's what belongs in this area. Next one's going to be employment areas. There's a mutual understanding that the city is growing and community members have now looked through the city's master plan and urban design plan, the new zoning bylaw project, and it's disheartening to see the results and lack of foresight regarding the neighborhood's future needs. This neighborhood receives scores from 1 to 4 regarding restaurants, cafes, grocery, and shopping as per real estate assessments. Why? Because it's not sustainable. The proposed development does not appropriately anticipate community needs, nor does it contribute to a sustainable community. We are requesting, with the help of the city, that the neighborhood be provided with an adequately sized employment area.
Martin, you've just exceeded your 10 minutes.
I got half a page left.
Okay, go quickly.
Thank you. This is Brantwood. It's 3 square kilometers, 2 schools, 2 light commercial areas, and a place of worship and a sports park. The predecessor saw the opportunity and need for this. And this is our neighborhood. 3 square kilometers, we have a school, a place of worship, and a brick and stone store. We request that Cache Homes be required at a minimum by the city to have a light commercial area in phase 1 to provide adequately sized employment to this area. This is an important feature that should be required so that we have that self-sustainable community that Brantford is working towards. Please do not ignore the economic growth and employment opportunities and instead help us. Community members are forced to put their young adults into Ubers to get them to and from work due to their parents' own work commitments. How is this sustainable? Promoting sustainable development requires action and yet was ignored for this neighborhood. The urban plan recommends neighborhoods incorporate employment areas. So again, we request you incorporate it in this development.
Okay, Martin, sorry, we're at
I got
11
2
minutes
lines.
now.
Can I say one line, my clothing?
I know we're all sick of Ubering our kids to work. I'm in that boat with you. And I thank you so much for your
Thank you.
time coming out.
Please be the tip of the spear.
Thank you. Up next, I have Abish Patel. Is he virtual?
Use *6 to unmute.
Do we have this individual present? Okay, so we're gonna move forward. I do have an individual who is online who's had his hand raised the entire time and waiting very patiently. So I am gonna call upon Gord Stockdale.
Mr. Stockdale, if you can accept the prompt on your screen.
And Mr. Stockdale, you'll have 10 minutes inclusive of questions from this committee. Before you begin, and once you've unmuted, just state your name and your address, and then you have the floor for 10 minutes.
Thank you. Gordon Stockdale, 302 Mount Pleasant, directly across from the new road that is going to be going into Access Zone 2. My question, and now I have spoke with Jeff and John from planning as well as the Cache representative, and the road is going to be slid over 1 meter, 3 meters, et cetera, towards the school, or sorry, towards the church. However, the issue with that is these 2,000 cars that Martin just spoke about a day are going to be exiting either down at the other street near McGee and Hogarth, or up across directly from my house. Now, that house has been there as long as the church has been there. And we're going to be looking out the front window across Mount Pleasant Road at apartments or condos, according to this plan. The church, I see, has maximized the capacity that they have of the space, but I also see that the original owner of the property is making out like a bandit by still residing on the property. My concern with that is Tootla Heights Road should be able to run directly west through the existing property of the seller and tie into this development, thereby alleviating the overflow onto the side streets. They can get out onto a main road. And if the city does get a ring road, they can use Tootla Heights to get out to the highway through Cockshut Road, 54, et cetera. So my question is, similar to the last presenter, is the 25 and 30-foot lots directly across from my 110-foot lot. And the traffic, the intersection, roundabout, whatever you want to call it, is not going to slow down the 100 km/h drivers using the center lane to pass. So my question is, can the end of the development in phase 3 not be opened onto Conklin Road to allow for flow right from Conklin all the way over to Mount Pleasant? My other question is about the zoning that's going to be on the corner of this new street and Mount Pleasant Road directly across from the house. Future high-rise residential, meaning probably 5 or 6 stories. I mean, I've been in that house with my family. We've raised our 3 children there. When we first moved there, Farrington School was still in use. So I've watched that be demolished. The only thing that's still there is my house and the church. So all the infills that we want to do are destroying existing legacy neighborhoods. No matter how you slice it, that's what's happening. That's my comment. I'd like the road eliminated from in front of my house. I know the chances of that happening are slim and none. But that's my comment and that's my ask.
Okay. Thank you so much, Gord, for coming out today and sharing that. I know you had some questions in there. The applicant will have the ability at the end of this to provide clarification, and hopefully they'll take that time to address the few questions that you did have. Thank you so much. Okay, so moving forward, we're going to go at this another 15 minutes and then we're going to take a short break just to get a little bit refreshed, but I do have 15 minutes, so I will open the floor to anyone in the room. Anyone wishing, I see an individual with his hand up, so I'll welcome you to the front of the room. Pick a chair, pick a mic, and then you're going to push the start-stop button. When it lights up red, you're ready to go. Please remember to state your name and your address, and then you have the floor for 10 minutes. Did you get it all? Yep, have a seat. Push the button. It's all yours, 10 minutes.
Okay, my name is Tony Bolson. I live at 135 Hunter Way in Brantford. And members of the committee should have an email that I sent to councillors Jacola and Sullivan back in January, and also should have an addendum which I provided earlier this week, and I shall address my comments to those pieces of paper. In 2009, I, along with Chuck Beach, were chair of the city's Environmental Advisory Committee, and my comments today are consistent with the ideas that we had at that time. I'm going to skip over some of this. The main concern that I have is the quality of life for local residents, which includes myself, and the residents that will certainly follow me, because I don't think I'll be around that much longer. Also make the point that the plan establishes an urban landscape which will be there for decades and centuries to come. A lot of things have to be considered, and once the developer does his job, as I'm sure he will do very efficiently, that's the way it will stay for a long time. And we have a responsibility today, committee and public, to get it right, because what we do will live with us for a long time. The suggestions that I have is that no trees should be cut down to make room for this development. Leaves plenty of land for houses. I also suggest that an additional buffer zone be created along the trail to accommodate more trees and preservation of the recreational nature of its use. I also think that this is an opportunity for the city to work with the developer to provide affordable housing as part of this project. I think there's a lot that can be done there. Now, my general attitude is that I would prefer that this land be not developed, but I recognize that a growing community has to have places for people to live. And so I think that I wouldn't oppose this development, but I think we should think very carefully about how it's done. I'll move on to the addendum which I added this week. Recently, I discovered a University of Waterloo report on the effect of climate change in Canada. And it was reported in the Expositor in February of this year. And Brantford is identified as among the top 10 hotspots in Canada for the years between 2051 and 2080. And that's based on the dramatic increase in days above 30 degrees and the length of heat waves. Much of this is due to the heat island effect in cities. And the heat island effect in cities is when concrete and asphalt replace vegetation temperatures, replace vegetation, and vegetation decreases the temperatures. The Brant Health Services also produced a report, which was called Extreme Heat in Brant, which describes the effect of increasing heat on residents in Brantford and the impact on the healthcare system, which is predicted to be significant. The point is that trees are cooling agents. They've been cooling agents for humanity ever since we roamed the plains of Africa. And if we cut them down here in this development, we're going to lose that. As well, we have a recreational use for these trees. There is a woodlot in phase 3. If you look at the aerial photograph, you see it at the northern point of that phase 3 aerial photograph. And this is the one that I think is going to be cut down by this development. It's something which I'm sure that the Acacia people are very competent in being able to avoid. They have planners, they have designers, they have expertise to be able to create their development without destroying this woodlot. I estimate in terms of our major concern in terms of this generation, which is to try and come to terms with climate change, that this woodlot sequesters between 1 and 2 tons of carbon each year. Now, the city has a policy. The policy which was established about 10 years ago, and that is that we should increase our urban forest from 21% to 40%. If the city approves a development plan which cuts down a major woodlot, then it's going contrary to its own policy intentions. It would make it a heck of a lot more difficult to achieve that 40% urban forest. And what we're talking about here is the quality of life of people in Brantford in years to come. Unfortunately, I'll probably not experience that. I'm 80 years of age in a couple of weeks, and I'll unlikely to be able to see the end of this development. But I firmly believe that we should leave this earth a better place than we found it. It's becoming increasingly difficult to do that, but in meetings like this and in decisions made here by the city, by the Development Corporation, we have an opportunity to create a better future for our children and grandchildren. I hope that the City Council can find a way to prevent these trees from being cut down and from becoming asphalt and concrete. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Any questions from the committee? We do have a minute left. Seeing none. Thank you so much, Tony, for taking the time to come up here.
Well, good luck in your deliberations.
Thank you.
It's not easy.
Nope. We do have time for one more presentation before we recess. Is there anyone in the crowd here who would like to address the committee? Ma'am?
Well, I've never done this before.
There's a first time for everything. No. Yeah, I'm so sorry. You're gonna have to use the microphone or the individuals watching online won't hear you and the individuals in the room won't hear you clearly. Nope. We can bring the table up to standing position. Yeah, I'm not sure it's necessary. We can address the committee.
I need phase 3 up there.
Sure.
Who's ever doing that?
We're gonna pull that up.
My name's Donna Mordew. Oh, hi. My name's Donna Mordew. I live at 379 Mount Pleasant Road. And I love it there. I did love it there. Need the picture
It's
coming.
coming. It was unexpected. It was an unexpected request, so I would encourage you to
Oh.
begin with the presentation. We will pull it up as soon as we possibly
Kind of
can.
hard to say without it there. Our properties are along Mount Pleasant Road. This is really dumb. My properties are along Mount Pleasant Road, my property. We've lived there for 55 years in a house that is 70 years old. And we sold that house and built a house next door. We've lived there for 25 years. The house on the other side of 377 is Chris Farrell's house, and it's been there for 60 years. So we're in an area that's certainly well developed, and it's an estate area. I don't think anybody has more than 2 or 3 neighbors, or we have 9 neighbors that will be butting up to our property. I don't think anyone in Brantford has 9 neighbors in their backyard, or I don't think anybody in Toronto or Vancouver, BC, or anybody has 9 neighbors, but we do. We used to have a difficult neighbor, so we resolved that, but now we got to sort out 9 people. The area I'm just talking about my little area. It's pretty little up there. I thought I saw a bigger picture once. But anyways, I'm talking about just the 3 houses right now and the rest of Mount Pleasant Road. But I'm talking about the traffic. It's a 2-lane highway. I'm talking about the schools, the local community schools. Agnes Hodge has 15 portables. So with all those people moving in, it's going to be pretty bad. In the back part of our property is a cul-de-sac with, I think, about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 houses. And it would be really nice if they weren't there. That would limit our backyard. If they weren't there and we had a park in that cul-de-sac, that would be really relaxing for all the Mount Pleasant people in our small area. would be a lot better to have that there than 9 backyards. So I think my main concern is all the people running into our backyard, when we could probably have a park there, or just a small green space area at least. And we get rid of some people, then we're left with about 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 more people in our backyard. So I don't know if other people have had any difficult problems with neighbors, and I don't expect to, but could happen. So thanks.
I assume that means you're complete. Any questions from the committee? Counselor Carpenter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question. How deep is your lot at 379?
Sorry, you weren't done yet. We had questions for you. If you wouldn't mind approaching the microphone, there was a question from Counselor Carpenter.
Oh,
How deep is your lot? The question. Counselor Carpenter is tuning in virtually. You can see him on the screen up here. And you need to speak into the microphone or no one will hear you, including
Oh,
Counselor Carpenter.
okay, our property is 400 feet deep. Is that right, Bill?
So you have 400 feet from the 400 feet before there's a house behind you, for example. But the house is on the side or because that cul-de-sac street G is
At
there?
the side is, there's a cul-de-sac coming in there. And
Yeah.
it's gonna have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people in our backyard. And
Okay.
then at the very back, there's
Okay.
1, 2, 3, that's 8. And then our neighbor on the one side and our neighbor on the other side.
Okay,
So-
and the reason you're having all those neighbors is because your property's so deep that it actually goes into a street. That's where they come from?
We really liked it deep. When we bought there, it was all farmland and we lived
Sure.
in the country, so we love it deep.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions from committee? Seeing none. Thank you so much for coming out. I am going to call a little bit of a recess break, a refreshment break. So this meeting will resume at 11:25. Okay, as it's 11:25, we will get started shortly. Just give everyone an opportunity to have a seat. We have, thank you, Councillor Sless. We now have quorum to to proceed. All right, so we were in the middle of the hearing from the public during the statutory public hearing, and I see that we have an individual with their hand up. Ooh. So you probably know the drill by now, but turn the mic on when it lights up red, you're ready to speak. Do tell us your name and your address first, and then you have the floor for 10 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak from the floor. I do appreciate that. My name is Mary Lou Mackey. I live at 14 Clement Drive, obviously in the subdivision Pioneer Grove. And I'm probably going to reiterate a few points that have been made, but I'll be brief. I would like to make my comments based on the staff report that was prepared for you today. And in particular, page 31, section 9.3.1.1.1, where staff provided a rationale for extending Clement. And I'm here to speak against extending Clement. In this section, the staff offered 3 reasons: that the road was always envisioned to be extended and facilitates traffic circulation, that they can put traffic calming measures in to allay the concerns about traffic safety that have been expressed by residents, and that by extending Clement, it offers a viable alternative to a signalized intersection at Mount Pleasant for access to the new development for the school and parks that will be in the new subdivision. I would just like to counter these rationale a little bit by suggesting that just because Clement was envisioned to be a through street does not mean that it makes sense today. I have lived on Clement for 32 years. We were told when we moved in that there would be a subdivision at the end. No one debates that point. We were all quite clear on that. But at the time, subdivisions being developed were developed in a much different way than they currently are. I would also ask you to consider that Ada and Palmerston were through streets in this city for a very long time and have recently been dead-ended so that traffic does not flow through those streets to get to Brant Avenue. And I suspect that that was done largely because residents in that community were very upset with the amount of traffic that was flowing through their community and were concerned about safety, much like the residents in our neighborhood. So while Clement was envisioned to be a through street at one time, as was Sherman, and we agree and appreciate Cachet's willingness to reconsider that, the traffic patterns have changed. And if Clement is the only through street to the new phases of development, we can expect a tremendous increase in traffic, which, as my wonderful neighbors have pointed out, puts a lot of our children at risk. It certainly might assist in traffic flow, but it does not in any way improve the life of the current residents. And while we appreciate you have to consider new residents, we also ask that you consider current residents. We've also pointed out that the nature of the new subdivision's aesthetic is quite different from the aesthetic in Pioneer Grove, where homes were built very differently. All the homes in our subdivision were individually built and designed so that different builders built different homes. And that's quite a different aesthetic from the kinds of homes that are being built today. We don't think that there's a need to have a joining connection between the two subdivisions. There doesn't seem to be any real logical reasons, though I suppose the staff have provided some, but they don't seem to be all that compelling. The second point staff make in the report is traffic calming measures could be added to alleviate some of the concerns that citizens have about the traffic. There are real issues with traffic calming measures, and I'm sure you are all aware of those things, not to mention that they are often impractical for snow removal and also create additional noise as people stop and start their vehicles to go over them. And our homes are not set back from the road, perhaps as far as some homes in some areas where those traffic calming measures have been used. So we don't believe that that's necessarily an ideal solution. Another point in the staff report was around viable alternative to signalized intersection. And this really points out that the plan is to divert traffic to Clement. so people can avoid the lights at Mount Pleasant once they're put on, if in fact lights are put at Mount Pleasant and Beckett. This actually proves the point of the residents, that people will use this street to either access the intersection with the lights or to actually avoid it if they're going to make a right-hand turn onto Mount Pleasant. And that means that people will divert up through Clement, increasing the traffic significantly. There is over 500 various types of mixed residential units that are proposed in these plans. It's easy to see the potential for traffic is very significant. A couple of other points that have come out in the presentation I would like to just address, if I may. One is that we've been told that by keeping Clement open or making it a through street, that would allow people in Pioneer Grove to access the amenities in the new subdivision. One of those amenities perhaps being a school. Well, I used to work for the school board and I know their process deeply. I will tell you that it's a very long process in determining, and I know you know that as well, whether or not a school will be viable for them. And nonetheless, even if it is, that's great, but we could have a pedestrian access, and why not encourage kids and their families to walk to school rather than to have vehicles drive them to school? I mean, isn't that better for the climate? Isn't that better for our communities? Certainly the school board perspective is that we should be encouraging people to walk, not ride. Another point I just wanted to add is that we've heard talk about the need for a second emergency access point for the new subdivision. We would just like to propose that we don't believe Clement the issues for Clement should be made so significantly harder because of something you're trying to do for a new subdivision. If a second access point is needed in a new subdivision, build it in the new subdivision. There's no need to destroy the comfort of many residents of your city to do something that you have control over now that you can fix. I mean, the ask is pretty simple. Keep Clement closed to through traffic. Treat the residents of our street and our neighborhood the same way you've treated the residents in the Dufferin area. Respect our concerns about traffic, just the same way you've respected theirs. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, you get off easy. Thank you. Is there anyone in the room attending in person or virtually who would like to speak? I see an individual in the back. So just push the start stop button. When it lights up red, you're ready to speak. State your name and your address, and then you have 10 minutes.
That's on? Okay, my name is Gunter Ash. I live at 411 Mount Pleasant Road. And my question is, with all this new housing development that you're putting in and roads for cars, where is the LRT route that's going in this development? And if you're gonna do it later on, I mean, where are you gonna put it? Are you gonna put it on the rail trail? Because you haven't allowed for any movement of traffic except for cars in this new development, and then, which means this development is geared for car traffic. Okay, that's my question.
Just so that you're aware, this portion would be for sharing comments. You can ask questions, but they will not be answered at this point. The consultant is making notes of questions and he will hopefully address that during his clarification.
Okay.
So it's not so much a dialogue, but commentaries. That concludes your comments, I suppose. Very good. Thank you so much. Is there anyone else in the room or attending virtually who would like to address the committee? I have to ask 3 times. So is there anyone else in the room or attending virtually who would like to address the committee? If you are attending virtually, use the raise hand function. Last time, is there anyone in the room or attending virtually who would like to address the committee? Okay, seeing none, this concludes the public portion of this statutory public hearing. We will move into the clarifying portion of this where the applicant would have 5 minutes to answer any questions or address any concerns that were raised during the discussion. So I see that we have Marcus and Mark. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll keep my submissions brief. I was taking notes. There's a few items I'd just like to speak to, and then Marcus would like to also address a few of the items, if that's okay. We did, in no particular order, Madam Chair, we did hear some comments, a lot of commentary about the location of parks within this community. And I'll just, again, I'd like to reiterate a note that this community went through an extensive planning process through the block planning exercise, and was through those discussions with city staff in consultation with parks planning staff, school boards. The location of those parks have been located centrally to this community so that it services both the phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 lands. We believe the parks as cited are appropriate where they are. This neighborhood has been designed to be a walkable community. We do note that there was concerns regarding the connectivity between phase 3 lands and Mount Pleasant. And again, I'll reiterate through the conditions of approval, Cache Homes will be required to study and provide for a walkway block that will connect Mount Pleasant to the phase 3 lands, thus increasing the connectivity between the existing developments along Mount Pleasant to the new community services that are being planned for. We heard comments about transition and compatibility, and Jeff made a great comment during his presentation that the policy framework in which we are working with today has changed through provincial policies and redictated or reiterated through the city's new official plan. These areas, these greenfield areas, are targeted to hit a certain density target. I recognize that meeting those minimum density provisions, we do have to balance the objectives of complete communities and designing new communities so that they are compatible with our existing neighborhoods, and going back to the principles of compatible development, which is not necessarily the same as or even similar to existing developments. So those are some compatibility principles that we speak to when we look at new developments in proximity to existing developments. And it's our opinion that how we cited the draft plan of subdivision coupled with the corresponding zoning bylaw amendment, where we have new lots abutting existing lots. Those lands will be restricted to a 36-foot lot with a lot depth of 100 feet. We think that's appropriate transition. Siting for those houses will be dealt with through detailed design, or again, we'll get into details on landscaping, screening, and fencing requirements between the new development and the existing. I'll note that where you do have new developments abutting existing residential, Cache Homes through the detailed design will be required to explore installing fences between the lots. The fences would meet the city's applicable fence bylaws. And I'll just, there was some comments about tree removals and a woodline. I'll just note again, through the block planning process, there was an environmental impact study that was that was completed. We did review those areas on the plan. That wooded area that was flagged as a concern was evaluated. It was deemed to not meet the city's and the county's criteria for significance. But to offset those removals, we are going to be undertaking a significant planting plan. We have identified a compensation area that will be significantly planted with new trees to offset those removals. I think those are some of the salient points I wanted to get across, and I'll defer to Marcus on a few other items.
Thank you, Mark. And through you, Madam Chair, I just want to say thank you to everybody that's come out from the neighborhood. It's pretty admirable, the united front or the united approach they've taken to commenting on the development. I've had the pleasure of speaking with some of them offline leading up to today's meeting. All of their comments are valid. We appreciate them. We've taken most of them into consideration. Alongside one of their comments pertaining to Clement and Clement being closed, it was actually a question from Councillor McCreary about the phase 2 collector or road and collector portion of the road being built up front with phase 1. That's likely not a feasible option. Economically, it wouldn't make sense to do it all in phase 1. I'd like to suggest a bit of a hybrid approach, and it's something maybe that the councillors or the committee can consider alongside staff, that maybe there's a hybrid solution where we provide the breakaway gates, the emergency gates in phase 1 until such time that the phase 2 collector road is built. At that point, the city and this committee and any other committee that exists in the city could have the opportunity to reevaluate if those breakaway gates could be removed or if they're required to stay. It would leave all the power in the city's hands as well as the community. And I don't want to say kick the item down the road, but it would give the city an opportunity to evaluate the situation much later on when there actually is some houses built.
We've just exceeded the 5 minutes.
Sure.
Did you have much more? Should I ask for an extension?
That was my only suggestion. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. The public meeting portion of this item is now closed. You can have a seat. What I need next is a mover and a seconder to place item 4.1 on the floor so that we can discuss it. This is your time to show up, Councillor Sless, seconded by Councillor McCreary. Thank you. And now we will move into discussion. Councillor Sless.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got a few clarifications I'd like to get from staff. Firstly, would it have been possible for the developer to request approval for high-rise buildings on this property?
Through you, Mr. Chair, could they have requested what I'm hearing, a high-rise building? So let's say greater than 6 stories. They could have, it may have triggered an official plan amendment. The policy direction for the residential area and this general area tends to be more so for low-rise build forms, but they could have sought zoning approval to go higher.
That would have been an option they could have had, or they could have built something 6 stories high without doing that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, because these lands are in the County of Brant zoning bylaw, it still does trigger the need for a zone change. So any changes to what's currently there today, which tends to be suburban residential, they would need a zone change.
Okay, thank you. And I guess, again, through you, Madam Chair, to staff, are the road widths in the proposed development of a width that would allow on-street parking?
Through Madam Chair, yes, that's correct.
Both sides or one side?
To the chair, Gary Peaver, Manager of Development Engineering. Through the chair to you, Councillor Sless, the determination of the actual asphalt width hasn't been determined at this time. We do have the option of having asphalt width for parking on both sides or just one side. But those details have not been determined particularly yet.
Okay, I would certainly suggest that we look at allowing both sides, that we make it of a width that would make that safe as far as a roadway, but would allow parking on both sides. When I looked at the renderings that were shown today, it would appear that there are driveways with the family homes that would accommodate 2 vehicles side by side, as well as a double garage. Was I seeing what I think I was seeing? There would be off-street parking for 4 vehicles at each of those single-family homes?
Through you, Chair, Sean Howe, Senior Project Manager. That's correct. Some of the lots would allow for the double width.
4 vehicles off-street.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. No, I appreciate that clarification. Again, another question. There was discussion about trees that have been taken or are being taken down to accommodate the development. Can you tell me the replacement ratio for trees that are removed down? If one's cut down, how many need to be replanted?
Through the chair to you, Councillor Sless, the conditions currently state for all the trees removed on the current private property would be at a replacement value of 3 to 1.
So every tree taken down would be replaced by 3 new plantings. Is that correct?
Through the chair, partially correct. The idea is to get as many planted back in the subdivision as possible. In the end, if there is no room for those additional trees to be planted, there would be a cash in lieu collected by the municipality.
And in turn, trees would be planted somewhere else within the city limits.
Through the chair, that is correct, but it is first and foremost to get as many trees planted in this area first.
Yep. Okay, and then right at the end there, when there was clarification by the developer, he offered a suggestion of putting in a emergency gate at the end of Clement. Would that require an amendment, or would there be an understanding that would take place?
Through the chair to you, Councillor Sless, there would be an understanding that would take place. Ultimately, we would still have the road, the curbs, the sidewalks built, and we'd work with the developer to have a gate installed at that time. We do not need an amendment.
So that would be a mutually agreed upon thing that wouldn't require an amendment. Okay, I appreciate that. And I guess, Madam Chair, I'd just like to offer some clarity because it was said 2 or 3 times.
I've let
Sorry?
you go in a minute. I've let you go about a minute past your speaking opportunity. I'm just going to see if there's anyone else waiting to ask questions. And I do have someone else waiting, so I'll put you down for a second speaking opportunity.
Yes, if you could, please. Thank
Sorry
you.
to interrupt you.
No problem.
Councillor McCreary.
I'll be expecting that extra minute too. I have some questions of staff. So the developer has increased the minimum lot width to 33 feet. Is that correct, from 30? It's a good thing I'm getting that extra minute.
Through you, Chair, that's correct. There's the applicant's proposing a variety of lot widths to suit the different dwelling types.
Thank you, Sean. And that's an important 3 feet because that's going to allow the parking of a large vehicle in front of a residence, whereas at 30 feet, it's probably not going to happen, right?
Correct. It does allow extra room for on-street parking.
So that's a significant change. So there were a number of minor changes suggested with, for instance, the inclusion of an east-west trail connection, behind the houses on Mount Pleasant that have the funny little back lot jog in them, that perhaps that be considered for a different use. Is there the latitude going forward that the developer may undertake some of those things, even though we are approving this today? In your opinion? Maybe is a good answer.
Through you, Chair, to clarify, we're asking about the phase 3, trail connection to Mount Pleasant Road.
The trail connection that would run behind the existing houses on. Yes. That was suggested by a neighbor today.
Through the chair. So through the chair to the Councillor Nicole Wilmot, Acting Commissioner of Community Development, additional connections to this plan would require an amendment.
Not necessarily today.
You would need to amend it today.
Okay, all right, thank you. With respect to the Clement issue of the connection to the new neighborhood, we heard from the proponent that he's suggesting that we could make a choice at a later date, whether to continue to keep the gate in place or to remove it. Would it, through staff, would you suggest that there may come a time when we could do the same solution as was pointed out a number of times today with respect to Palmerston, where we could permanently close up that road?
So through the chair to the counselor, that's correct. I mean, at the end of the day, what we're looking at today is approval of the draft plan, and that wouldn't change the ultimate construction or configuration of the road, to which we would then need an amendment to this draft plan. What you're speaking of is really more of an operational matter that could be brought forth after construction, at any time by the request of a property owner or through direction of this council for staff to investigate the operational matter with which could result in the closure of a road.
Thank you.
And you didn't even need your extra minute that you were fighting for. Not seeing anyone else in the queue, so I'm going to take the opportunity to ask a few questions myself. The downside to chairing is I always have to go last, and all the good questions have been asked already, but I'm glad that we heard from the developer and staff. I do have a question of staff regarding snow removal. If we do close off permanently, we're gonna have issues with snow removal in that area, or would we be able to put, with the emergency barricades, let's talk about that. Are we gonna be okay as far as snow removal goes for both neighborhoods?
Through the chair to yourself, it will be challenging with the gate there to provide snow removal at I'm gonna say an effective way. It has been done, for many years to date at the end of Clement. So the operations staff would be able to work through that. It also depends on the gate system. If we could have something they could open up and drive through. Again, those details yet to be determined. So I think the situation with the gate would allow some flexibility for snow removal with operations. With respect to fully closing the road, then yes, a permanent closure and non-connection would continue to be a bit of an issue from a snow removal standpoint.
Okay, and we've already determined we can do the emergency breakaway barriers, so I won't get into that, but I do want to talk about the tree replacement ratio and where the trees end up. As somebody pointed out here today, I'm an avid user of the trails, and I've noticed quite the change along the trail system in this particular area. And I realize it's something that's unavoided, but is there any way that after the subdivision has reached its capacity for the trees that's going to go in there, that we can sort of direct where the trees go and have those the replacement trees planted along the trail, not specifically in this area, but in the general area?
Through the chair, yes, we'd be able to work with the developer for the areas that they're affecting. But if cash in lieu is given to the city, then we'd have a choice of where we would like those trees.
Okay, I would like to suggest that you keep those trees along that trail in that area. We've seen a lot of development on either side of Conklin that have taken out those trees, and I'd like to see that replacement go back to the trail system. Phase 2 contains mixed-use commercial, which, as you know, in Ward 1 is a hot topic. So I was really happy to see that the developer listened to that. Can you walk us through what the vision is for that? Like, is it going to look, this might have been a better question for the developer, but is it going to look kind of like what was built on the old Canadian Tire site with kind of some stack town?
Through to you, Madam Chair. That's a good question. At this stage, there's not a lot of detail that has been provided in terms of what that site will look like. That I would probably direct some of that maybe question to the applicant. However, the zoning is permissive. It allows for a number of commercial uses. I would imagine it would be similar to what is there at the site on Colburn Street, which are live work units. They're built to a certain product under the building code. This site would actually allow for mixed use buildings, which gives you some other options as well in terms of non-residential uses.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. And one last question. What does the timeline for assumption look like? I have a lot of unassumed lands in Ward 1, and there are some challenges that I'm used to handling in that regard. But what sort of timeline can we anticipate? Is it phase by phase, or is it once all 3 phases are complete?
Through the chair to yourself, assumption processes are laid out phase by phase. So they go when a phase is registered, the subdivision agreement, which would entail the process of when the subdivision get assumed. Typically, it's at the rate of how fast the developer can build houses and get their obligations under that agreement completed by. So if the developer, in this case, Cache, needs more time, could stretch out to 3 to 5 years or even up to 10 years plus. If the home building is successful and sales are happening, that could happen as quickly as potentially 3 years after the site has been started.
Okay, thank you. And are there any other, I have Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and the staff. Looking at the drawing, the closing of Sherman Drive, which has been accepted by the developer, and the question remains about Clement Drive. If we were to close Clement Drive, would the developer, would that be grounds for developer to go to the Ontario Land Tribunal? And if that was the case, would they then be granted both access to Sherman and Clement Drive, possibly to the OLT? Thank you.
Through the chair to Councillor Carpenter, Joe Muto, acting chief planner with the city. There would be that opportunity that the developer could appeal based on any changes that are before committee or council after the 20-day appeal period. Or also at this point, I think we're also close to the 120 days in terms of them being able to appeal directly for an indecision by council. I don't think Cache is going to go that avenue, but it sounds as though they're willing to work with city staff and council here to come up with that. But truthfully, it's a hearing de novo at the OLT, which means the notion of, you know, a connection from Sherman and Clement could be back on the table at that proceeding.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay. Any other comments from committee? Councillor McCreary for the second time.
Chair, thank you. I'll be supporting this today on the basis of hearing from the developer that they're willing to satisfy, excuse me, the neighborhood concerns with respect to the Clement connection. When I've heard from you folks today and correspondence I've received, that is the make or break for this development. And I want to hark back to, I believe it was Gord Stockdale that said that all too often new developments destroy legacy neighborhoods, and that's absolutely accurate. And without casting any aspersions on the developer before us today, because I think what they've got before us is a pretty good development. It is true, and you know, we see what's happened. Well, we're bearing the brunt of the inability of the former provincial government to deal with Toronto's growth problems, thereby spreading it out to be shared in the misery of Brantford and Milton and so on, right? And again, I mean, it's the destroying legacy aspect, but on a bigger scale. I think we also heard in the last exchange was quite telling when the OLT question was asked, and I could see Marcus shaking his head, no, that's not his plan. He's what's before us. He's willing to maybe modify to some extent, certainly with respect to the Clement road closure, that's important. But I think you've got we've got a good partner here who's going to be respectful of the neighborhood. We've seen that of late in Brantford, where we've got responsible companies that are coming to town to do developments that are interested in looking after the interests of the people adjoining them, regardless of the fact that the provincial government isn't. And that's not just the former Liberals, that's our friends at Queen's Park today as well. So there's no good planning reason to reject this today. There are a lot of reasons to accept it, and some of which are unsaid. And I look forward to you folks being able to continue to participate with them and us to make sure that what happens next door doesn't ruin your quality of life. So those are my comments, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. Councillor Sless.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of things. Firstly, I think the neighborhood is not probably going to be happy and enthusiastically support this. I think that they're very fortunate to have a developer that was willing to make concessions and try to accommodate as best they can and still do the work that they do. We deal with folks that would have been very stubborn and not made the concessions that these folks have made and compromised and tried to accommodate. So I applaud both sides. The community brought forward a number of concerns, and I think a number of them have been resolved through discussion and through negotiation. So I'm pleased to see that, and that certainly allows me the ability to support the what's before us. What I would like to clarify, though, Madam Chair, is a number of times today it was said that Ada Avenue and Palmerston were closed off because people didn't want traffic on their street, and that's why we should close Clement. And the truth of the matter is it was very dangerous on those two streets because of illegal activity. People were turning illegally off Brant Ave onto those streets, causing dangerous situations for the kids trying to play on those streets. They weren't expecting cars because cars were not supposed to be there. So it's kind of apples and oranges. We're trying to compare two things that aren't comparable. So I just wanted to make that clarification. It wasn't because people didn't want any traffic on their streets. It was simply because dangerous activity was happening because of illegal turns off of Brant Ave. Having said that, Madam Chair, I'm pleased to support this and I look forward to the vote. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the clarification. Any other comments from the committee before I wrap it up? All right, seeing none, I just want to make a few comments before we call the vote. This proposed community before us is the first block plan application to sort of go through the process. And it wasn't perfect, but we've definitely learned a lot, and I'm happy to share my experiences with other counselors who are going to be going through this process. You know, I do think the surrounding community should have been notified a little bit sooner in the process. Definitely, at least maybe not consulted as in depth as the landowners group or the immediate neighbors, but they should have been notified a little bit sooner. And that's something that we're going to bring back to our staff and our processes. I think that would have helped navigate quite a few of our issues if the community knew a little bit sooner. But while working, and that's through no fault of staff or the developer, just so everybody knows, it was just the way the process was laid out for us. But I think we could make some improvements there. While working through the plans, I do believe that the developer really did listen to the community, and most reasonable requests that complied with safety guidelines were adhered to and are reflected in this final plan. It's not every day that we see a developer that over dedicates green space. So that was a very pleasant addition to the neighborhood, and to see that that the developer really listened to the need for commercial space in the area was a big one. And I know that will be a welcome addition to West Brant. I do think that they went ahead, they built a community, not just a group of houses. We're going to have a beautiful park in the area and schools and commercial space. So I do want to take this opportunity now to thank the Ward 1 residents surrounding this area, and especially in the Pioneer Grove area. You guys organized in such a respectful way, and you got your point across loud and clear, and nobody crossed any lines. It was really respectful, and I welcomed every conversation that I could have with everyone. So thank you so much for getting us to this point where we have a community that we can, I'll say, deal with for you. And I'm really happy to hear. I know I've had these conversations 100 times about the emergency breakaway, which I think came as a suggestion from one of the residents that I see sitting in the audience today. So your neighbors have you to thank, and I thank you for that. But happy to hear that we're going to be installing those, and they'll stay in place so long as they need to, so long as the residents in Pioneer Grove want it to be that way, or, you know. But I do think it's an operational matter. We've heard we don't need to do any amendments, but just know that it's there, and I got your back, and I'm watching out for you, and I walk those trails, so I'm keeping an eye on what's going on over there. And I know that we have a really ethical and compassionate developer on the other end who's an individual of his word, and I know that we're gonna see that come forward. So even though you don't see any amendments happening today, it's just know that we're taking care of you, and it's going to remain closed, and we'll keep those kids safe, okay? We heard you loud and clear. Thank you so much. So in saying that, I will be supportive of the application before us today moving forward. noting that we're going to be taking care of the concerns about Clement Drive. That being said, we have this resolution before us moved and seconded. And Madam Clerk, we will call the vote on this.
The vote on item 4.1 carries on a recorded vote of 4-0. Those voting in favor, Counselor Secoli, Sless, McCreary, Carpenter.
And very good. We have no presentations, delegations, no items for consideration. There's no notice of motions, and this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you so much, everyone.